to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Big Breakfast. And today we have a very special guest, recently voted into the top 40 under 40 in construction in Canada, Arash. And also with me again this week is my colleague Sheldon. So Arash, before we ask you the most important question of the podcast, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and watchers?
Sure. Thank you guys for inviting me. Glad to be here. My name is Arash. I'm the CEO of AECO Innovation Lab. Glad to be here with you guys today.
So the most important question of the day, Arash, what did you have for breakfast?
I haven't. That's the problem. It's intermittent fasting, so it's painful.
Yes.
But no breakfast for me for a while.
Fair enough. Sheldon, can you? I mean, you can do worse.
No. Yeah, I just had porridge, some fruit, and a cup of coffee today.
I went with buttered bagel today with my coffee. So I think we've generally failed with that one, really, haven't we? No one's had anything interesting for breakfast.
I'll kill that for I'll kill for that coffee right now.
Arash, so would you like to give us a little bit of insight into AECO Innovation Labs? So it was founded by yourself and a few others. Was it last year or the year before?
Last year, beginning of last year, just before, actually just in the middle of the pandemic. That's
perfect timing.
Yeah, couldn't be better.
And what was the sort of the reasonings for starting AECO Innovation Labs? What sort of made you and your partners think this is the right time to start this business?
Sure. So my background is civil engineering. So that's what I started in school. And got interested in construction management and automated construction management. So did my PhD in that, and then joined the software company for some time, working on mega projects over $1 billion for project information management systems. After that, I joined University of Toronto, and I spent about 6 years at U of T, started and managed a research center on building innovations. And 4 of those 6 years, we were mostly working with the local governments on digitization of government services with regards to the development approval process. So we're looking at e-permitting systems at municipalities. And we did that for about 4 years. And towards the end of it, we got to a point that we'd done a lot of research, but we weren't able to produce tools that the industry could use. Because U of T was a research-intensive university, a lot of the R&D funds that would come in, we would spend on research, and we've done some fantastic research at U of T. But the challenge was we got to a point that we figured the industry is in need of tools and hands-on products that they could use to move forward. So AECO Innovation Lab was formed to bridge that gap between academic R&D and industry solutions. So we're basically an R&D management platform, if you will. So we bring in the stakeholders together, public and the private sector, and we tackle some of those underlying digitization issues within the AEC sector that we couldn't do in an academic setting. So we still have very strong academic ties. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Waterloo myself, and we work with a number of academics across Canada, and we just started to expand into US. So we basically have a strong academic network that help us with the research, and we focus on the management of that research and commercialization of that research. So that's basically what we do. We have some adjacent arms at AECO on top of R&D. As different groups came together on one of our projects, One Ontario, they also started talking to us about their digitization challenges. So when the Building Official Association came in, they were talking about the fact that the Ontario Building Code hasn't been digitized, and they've been asking for it for almost a decade. So we produced a product, My Building Code, and put that onto market and basically digitized the Ontario Building Code on an app, which was very well received by the industry. So we have this product studio arm that we create products that the industry requires. So instead of building products and trying to sell to the industry, we listen to the industry, we understand what is it that they need, we verify what is it that they need, and we put a POC, proof of concept, together for them to test and then get their feedback, and then we spin that off into a startup within the sector. So that's the second arm, and the third arm is consulting. So these are the three different arms of AECO. Started with the R&D management, and we now have the product studio as well as the consulting arm up and running.
You sort of mentioned it sort of briefly there. So One Ontario is one of the, would you call it a product or a platform that is currently sort of gaining quite a lot of traction? Do you want to sort of introduce that and be interested in understanding where that came from? Was that your idea, or did the municipalities or general contractors who came to you with, this is my problem?
No, it was definitely not our idea. It was a combination of everybody else's ideas in terms of what needed to be done in that space. So with One Ontario, the focus is on streamlining the development approval process in the province of Ontario. Under that banner, there was a lot of work that we did at U of T, others did at Ryerson, and a whole bunch of other consulting firms and groups have done work in that area. The government itself and different parts of the government have been doing some work on that along those lines. And it got to a point, quite honestly, that all of our reports and their reports and everybody else's reports was becoming the same. We all identified the challenges, we all agreed on the challenges, but nobody was doing anything about those challenges. So One Ontario was formed as a coalition of all those different players who've been working in this area or who are stakeholders in this area to come together and resolve that issue once and for all. Now we have a coalition of about 25, just over 25 different organizations that includes the Building Official Association, includes the Planners, Ontario Professional Planners Association. On the residential side, we have ResCon, Build, and OHBA that together represent the vast majority of residential developments in the province. We have OGCA on the commercial side and a lot of technology partners and stakeholders, including Conservation Ontario, who all come together. And what they're basically saying is that we understand there are challenges with the development approval process. We understand that we are part of that workflow, and we're willing to work together to resolve it. And the common denominator that they could all agree on is data exchange. And through all of our research that we've done, we realized that where it all falls apart is the data exchange between all these different stakeholders. So you have municipalities on one end who are adopting e-permitting solutions. There's a handful of products, most of them pretty good, that municipalities are picking up. And then you have agencies like Conservation, MTO, and all the other applicable law agencies who are picking up solutions or developing in-house solutions. The challenge is that the only data exchange between municipalities and all these different stakeholders is paper right now. So you could fax the paper, or you could email the paper, or you could physically move the paper, as is being done right now with curbside pickup because of COVID. But at the end of the day, it's all paper exchange. So that's what One Ontario is focusing on, defining what language and what format these different agencies need to communicate to each other. So that's the essence of One Ontario.
And that language issue, is that the biggest problem? I mean, different companies will call apples something slightly different. You know, getting that common sort of schema together to understand when someone says A, they mean B to someone else. Is that the hardest part for One Ontario and the data exchange?
Not necessarily, because in our previous work, we attempted to standardize the definitions and processes, and that failed. And the reason that failed was because our municipalities, asking them to change what they've been doing for decades is very difficult. So instead, what One Ontario is doing is asking them to do whatever they're doing now, but we just need to map out what their workflows are and what their requirements are to what everybody else requires. So you can keep doing what you're doing, but when you're exporting that information to an agency, we need that formatted in a certain way so the agency can actually absorb that automatically. Because the situation that is right now, we have municipalities who've got e-permitting solutions, good solutions, and their solutions are saying we are capable of the agencies logging onto our system, right? Let's just everybody use our system. And that makes sense from a municipality perspective. But from an agency perspective who deals with 20 different municipalities, they're saying, well, that's not going to work because every municipality is using a different system. And I'm not going to log into 20 different systems to get the information that I need. So you know what? Fax it in or email it in. At least that's consistent. And that's the problem, connecting all these different systems to one common platform. So mapping definitions is certainly part of it. But a bigger part, in my opinion, is for these agencies and municipalities to decide and explain clearly what is the information that they need, in what format do they need it in, and when do they need that information. Like those are the three big questions that we have for everybody who's joining One Ontario. They need to define what is it that they need, in what format can they accept that, and when do they need that information. Because currently, when we go digital, a biggest challenge in government is that sometimes they digitize the paper process, which defeats the whole purpose of digitization. When you go to a digital platform, your workflows could be very different. So the biggest challenge, long answer to your short question, but the biggest challenge is to identify how the workflows are going to change now that we have a digital asset in front of us and not paper, because that's where the biggest bang for the buck is, in my opinion, in terms of gaining efficiencies, of doing things a little differently now that we have access to a digital asset.
Mm-hmm. And what's the final vision you guys have for One Ontario? Where do you want to take it?
Excellent question. So we've already started the One Canada portal initiative that basically is the higher level above One Ontario. So One Ontario talks about data exchange standards between municipalities and stakeholders, and Ontario is our sandbox, if you will. We're already talking to BC and Nova Scotia, and they're looking to see what happens to One Ontario so they can adopt the same thing across different provinces. But the One Canada portal, that project will be looking at submission of BIM files to municipalities for permitting. And the reason we're doing that is because the design community has invested heavily in BIM. We've done 3 national BIM surveys in Canada so far. And there is data to show that our design community is actually a lot more BIM capable than some give them credit for, especially on the ICI sector, but slowly getting into residential as well. So what we're doing with the federal government, we're putting a proposal together with Building a Smart Canada and the federal government for the submission for a data standard for BIM submission to municipalities. Now, we have Calgary as an example of a municipality in Canada who's working towards BIM submission. But the challenge is expecting individual municipalities to become BIM capable is a tall order, given everything else that they have going on and the budget restrictions and all that good stuff. So what our vision is for the industry to be able to submit a BIM file to a single portal based on the standards that Building a Smart Canada is going to specify, and then for that portal to become intelligent, so we can start doing a lot of checks that municipalities have to do or agencies have to do on that BIM platform, and it's going to be a BIM GIS integration on that platform. So we're going to be doing a lot of the checks centrally, and then we'll send that documents in whatever format the municipalities can accept to municipalities for processing. So if a certain municipality is willing to become BIM capable, fantastic, we can send them the BIM file, but most municipalities will not do that. They want 2D drawings, and we can easily generate 2D drawings from the BIM file and send them to them. But along those files that we're sending, we're actually going to be sending them a number of checks that have been done on the BIM submission. So that's the end vision, several years ahead of us. But that's essentially where we're headed. And that feeds into a whole lot of other things. So the reason that's going to the federal government is because that gives the government a massive data bank of all the digital assets, digital copy of all the assets that are being built across the country. So when you talk about digital twins and all the other fun stuff in this area, that could become a massive repository of information that could feed all of that. And then there's things beyond that. So if you have the BIM file, then you can do as-built BIM, and then you can do automated inspections of the facilities and so on and so forth. So it enables a whole bunch of other things down the road for this industry with the submission of BIM to municipalities.
No, yeah, you're right. I mean, that is a sort of a exciting development, and the interesting thing is sort of when you talk about municipalities and properly sort of digitizing workflows, and if you can build the rules, you know, you turn the code and what have you into rules that can read the files and say yes or no, it makes their lives much easier in many ways, and allows the people to focus on more value-added tasks rather than just sort of the tick box tasks that are so often required in sort of permitting and planning requirements. So it's not just does it do what it needs to do, it's, you know, you can focus more on what else can it do, how can it sort of further add value to the end user. I
couldn't have said it better. That's exactly it.
I'll let you keep that one then for you can quote me next time.
Will do. No, that's exactly what it is. And the good news here is that it's been done before, and that's the beauty of it. We are far behind a lot of other jurisdictions internationally on this issue. What our municipalities are doing today of going paperless is what Singapore did in 1995. So we are decades behind in some cases. There's some good news there, and the good news is that there are so many examples ahead of us that we can just take a look at, pick and choose what we like, and then put together a solution. So there are advantages of being last, but we really need to change that. So the good news in all of this is that nothing we're talking about, including the BIM submission and the automated code compliance checking and all that, none of that is new. It's already been done elsewhere. We just need to bring it here, and we need to update our codes and our standards to become capable for that kind of technology. But bottom line, it's not a technology question. Technology has been solved before multiple folds. It's a process question, and it requires buy-in from industry and the governments to be able to actually get this done. So we are hoping that with pressure from the industry and all these different organizations come together, we can convince the government that, you know what, now is the time. Let's finally get this done. No,
yeah, you're right. I mean, BIM's a tool, not a solution, really, isn't it? It's about the people, the workflows, and how you use it. I mean, Sheldon, sort of, your past before Invennt in your products and the likes in construction. You're often getting third-hand knowledge of what the spec is and things like that. So I'm sure the Chinese whispers that you've been used to, this process that Arash is talking about, would massively have helped you understand what your client really wanted.
Yeah, and even going back to the digitization of the building code, that was something I've worked with in years, and I just had to download copies in PDF. And it's interesting now that it's starting to be on an app, which would be more convenient from the job sites I've been on. Just having the access right there, saying, okay, what's that? I'm on a job site, doing a building, what code does that meet code? I can easily check it up on the app. That's very innovative. I think that's something we should have done years ago when I started back in 2005. But interesting to see that developing now. What I've seen in the past 12 months, how the world has gone, it seems to be more of an acceleration of adapting technology now in construction. More people are willing to open their eyes to seeing how we can use technology to benefit what we're doing or increase our processes, improve what we're doing. I think over the last 12 months or so, even more than that, there's been a big push. It's good to see that companies like yourself are leading the way in that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. The building code was an interesting story, because when they first came to us and said, can you digitize this? We looked at it and say, well, you have a fine there. You want to put that on an app? Yes, we can do that. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? So that was a painful several months of exercise for us to do that. And what was interesting is that we came up with a list of errors in the building code. Because once you go digital, then all the things come to surface, right? So there are numbering issues, and there are other things in the building code right now that we could catch by going to the digital platform. So that was interesting, but yeah, easier said than done. It's out there now. It's on there. My building code, you can download it for free, and on both mobile platforms right now.
So we've been sort of talking for 20 minutes already, we've been talking about nothing but innovation in construction, and it's sort of an interesting subject more generally. I mean, we at Invennt, as part of the services that we provide, we do sort of STRED in Canada and R&D in the UK and Ireland, and we're constantly up against this battle, and what I think is a poor reflection of us as an industry, that we do not innovate, that we are sort of cavemen when it comes to innovation, which is, I personally feel, and I hope you agree, especially with what you do, is very unfair for us as an industry, that we are actually very innovative as an industry. We just don't shout about it enough.
I can go both ways on this one. In Canada, at least, like when you look at the UK or Singapore or some other jurisdictions, they've adopted more of a top-down approach. At least there's leadership in place, and that leadership, when it comes to the BIM example, BIM is a good example. UK has a very sophisticated BIM implementation platform. They've invested a lot of money in it, and they basically equip the industry to become BIM capable. Singapore has done the same thing. Other jurisdictions have done the same thing. What's lacking here in Canada is that top leadership piece, because unlike UK, we don't have a government mandate. In fact, we are the only G7 country without a national BIM mandate. So gotta let that sink for a second. Having said that, we've got to your point, we've got the industry who's actually using BIM, investing in BIM with zero government support, right? So I give our industry a lot of credit for doing what they're doing. In one of the papers that we've done before, we described as a middle-out approach as opposed to a top-down approach. And someone commented that that's not an approach, the middle-out approach. And I said, exactly, that's not an approach, but that's what it is right now. It's the industry trying to move ahead and trying to pull the government, and the government is not coming. So I think a lot of the issues that we have, at least in Canada, our industry has been, because our industry players are competing globally, so they have to be on BIM, they have to be on the edge of technology, right? My goal, ultimate goal, if I'm successful in doing what we're doing, we want to push the government to catch up, right? It's one thing for government to lead, which would be fantastic, but at the very minimum, we want them to at least catch up to what the industry is doing, right? You can't have drones and AR and VR and 3D scanning on a site and eventually robots coming to site, and you still submit paper for permit. Like that just can't happen, right? At some point, our governments need to keep up. And the good news is that there's been a lot of investments announced, at least on the government side, for them to catch up. There's in one instance, there's a $500 million provincially that's been assigned to digitization of government services. So what COVID did for us, I don't think we could have done. What COVID did in a year, we couldn't have done in 5 or 6 years, because what COVID did was basically highlighted the issue, put the spotlight on the government and said, you know what, you're shut down. You're shut down because you're on paper, right? And there were governments that were municipalities who are already on e-permitting systems, and they remained open. And that black and white contrast really helped our cause, if you will. But to your point, I think the industry is trying. I think the industry is trying to constantly push the boundaries. But we do need government support. This kind of work requires some level of top-down support.
Yeah, so I mean, talking from a UK perspective, like you say, the mandate from government, also having a chief government advisor, whatever the role is called at the moment. It's changed quite a lot in the last 12 months. But when Paul Morrell was there, there was someone with government's ear and industry's ear, and it was that great conversation. The one negative, to an extent, we've done lots of great stuff top down, but coming top down, it's only the big players that were involved with a lot of that conversation. So it took a long time for the lower end and the smaller companies, the SMEs, to understand what the big complicated words were all about, and how, and it almost created a marketplace that excluded people because it was sometimes too difficult to join the conversation. But with the UK BIM Alliance, with the Construction Innovation Hub now, and all of these, government started, but the industry have sort of pushed forward now. It certainly helps get the messaging out. I think Canada's geography probably might make it, historically would have made it more difficult, but now with, like you say, the last 12 months has changed everyone's opinion in how to talk and communicate and share. So, geography can't be sort of an excuse anymore.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point, yes, the big players, they have to lead in some cases. They have more resources and they have more money, if not anything else. But it's the same thing in any industry, right? Even in sports, right? You have this, the biggest soccer news these days is this Super League, right? And yes, the big players can play together and make a lot of money. But the way that it was structured before was basically, yes, you have money, these guys don't have money, let's play together, and then they get some money. So I think that there's models there that could basically benefit the SMEs as well as the big guys. But there's no question that the big players need to lead. Having said that, we've had engineering firms in Toronto that have started their business on BIM and only BIM, right? So there is a vacuum, if you will, for that kind of players to come in and shine. So yes, the big players are there and they can lead, but they also have a lot of inertia, and for them to change, it's going to take a lot of resources. And I think there is an opening for SMEs that can switch faster and leapfrog forward, where some of the big players is going to take years and years to kind of turn the ship. But if you're in a Sea-Doo, you can kind of change course very quickly. So, I think there is an opening there for small players to kind of leapfrog to that edge of technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely. So unbelievably, we have been talking for nearly half an hour, so we will have to bring it to an end. One last sort of question from me. If you were to point our listeners and viewers to other than One Ontario, that's too easy an answer. So one exciting development, one exciting technology, one thing that you think everyone should not necessarily adopt today, but get up to speed with, what would that be for you?
Robotics. I think that's going to be the next big thing. They came around about 20 years ago and kind of died away because the technology wasn't there. The ideas were that the technology wasn't. But with what's happening today, I think robotics is going to be a very interesting area coming up in construction, kind of taking over some of the more risky and mundane tasks of construction relatively easily, where, to your point earlier, the workforce can focus on more interesting and more challenging tasks. So I think we're far away from robots coming in and build the whole thing, but I think very soon we can have them come in and help out in a number of tasks in a construction world. So that's what excites me. I think robotics could be the next big thing.
Yeah,
definitely.
Perfect.
Definitely. Well, unless you've got another question, Sheldon, we'll.
No, that's it. It was good.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me, and it was great having this a UK experience and UK perspective. And I think that's what this industry needs. We need to kind of get out of our own bubbles and boundaries and talk to people in other parts of the world, because there's a lot of lessons learned. So I commend you for doing what you're doing and for bringing in that UK experience into Canada. I think there's a lot to learn both ways.
And that's the key, both ways. I think we should never forget, yes, we're very good at certain things, but we're not the best at everything. And it should always be an exchange of learning and information. So, so thank you very much for your time today. It has been a really fascinating conversation. For everyone listening, watching, I hope you agree. And if you do, please do like, subscribe, and share this week's episode, and make sure you tune in next time. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to learn more about how Invennt can help your business maximize its bottom line? Head on over to www.invennt.com and get in touch with our team today. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.invennt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.